Repertoire every Thursday here, and we're lucky enough to have her tonight to enchant us with a little more grown-up stories. Her list of accomplishments throughout her career would take up way too much time to go over one by one. She's amazing at what she does. So we won't cut into your time with all that because you're just that great. But as you probably heard me just ask, in between stories, we'll take a little quick break if you want to go refresh your drinks and food. So without further ado, Ms. Regi Carpenter.
Well, money was scarce and food was gone, so my father did what any self-respecting river rat would do. He went fishing. But did he go looking for a perch? Oh no. A bullhead perhaps? Oh no. A bass? Oh, that wouldn't dignify our table. No, my father decided that he would go and get a substantial meal that would take care of all 7 of us. A muskrat. Now, muskrat is a compound word. Rat and musk. So my father, well, you know, I'm sure you all know what it looks like. It's kind of like the best friend of the beaver, but it's got a long, thin, hairless tail. And just like the beaver, it builds a burrow and it lives in there and it sleeps during the winter. So my dad caught the muskrat and of course he skinned it and then he put it in the oven. And then we all smelled something a little bit rank. Now my father smelled it too and he said, "Don't worry about it, kids. I'll put my special sauce on top." Now the special sauce always had something to do with beer. And so the smell, however, just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And then pretty soon the smoke was billowing in our house. We were so grossed out. We all ran outside. And my father had forgotten to take the scent glands out of the muskrat. So they had burst. His secret formula? Limburger cheese. Now I tell you that tale as a prelude to tonight's pieces because where there's smoke, there's dinner. It's food. And for me, I've always wondered, is family comfort food or a recipe for disaster? I'll let you figure it out. Well, I was wandering around Clayton the other day. Now, this is no big deal, you know, because carpenters have been wandering around Clayton for hundreds of years. All the way back to the 1600s when our name was not Carpenter, but Charpentier. And we heralded from Quebec. We had to escape religious persecution, and with people like ourselves, French, Canadian, Roman, Catholics, French-speaking, we walked down through Canada, got to the St. Lawrence River, got into a boat, said a Hail Mary, and sailed that wild river until it became mild and manageable. We were in Clayton. Now, the first thing we did was on the channel side of town, we set up shop. We were trappers, fishermen, guides, blacksmiths, and of course, carpenters. After that, we built St. Mary's Catholic Church, and behind it, a shrine to the Blessed Virgin Mary. So as I'm wandering around town, I start thinking about my ancestors, and that means I have to go and visit my first cousin, Wendy. Now, Wendy's been collecting my family genealogy for years. You know, she's got this thick scrapbook filled full of certificates. She's got birth, burial, and baptismal documents. And Wendy and I spend the entire afternoon going through all these documents, and we're matching all the stories we've heard with the dates and the names. And when I'm done, I decide I'm just going to walk around Clayton a little bit more. So I go over to Union Street, where my grandma's house used to be. The foundation is still there. The garden is still pumping up. I go over to Strawberry Lane, where Debbie McGrath and I used to catch praying mantises and wait for them to spit tobacco into our hands before we let them go. And I go over to my Uncle Rip's house, where my father and my Uncle Rip planted a horseradish patch over 75 years ago. So I'm walking around the wonky streets of Clayton, and I swear to you, every blade of grass is calling my name. I start to walk up Riverside Drive, and I'm thinking, what is it that makes somebody feel like they belong somewhere? What is it that makes you feel like you're a part of something, that somewhere is home? I'm musing about this, and I go into that little tourist shop across from Ryan's, and I see a bumper sticker that answers every question. Scars are tattoos with better stories. Of course, exactly. Now this gets me thinking about butterflies and how I knew I was a carpenter. Now by the time my brothers and sisters were each 6 years old, they all had a scar underneath their chin. Dave said a tree jumped in front of his bike one day. Cindy and Mary, they had their chins kiss the curb on the corner of James and Mary Street while they were out roller skating. And Tim, my brother Tim, he got his rather mysteriously during religious education. We just didn't talk about Holy Week around my brother Tim. Each time they got hurt, they'd come home bloodied and blurbling and show the injury to my father. Are you going to take me to the doctor's, Dad? Are you? And he'd say, oh, for God's sakes, you don't need to go to the doctor's. All you need is the butterfly bandage. You'll be perfectly fine. Now, my father had a cure for absolutely everything. If it was viral or bacterial, it included onions. If we had a cold, we had to eat these thick slices of onions with French's mustard on top. And if we had a cough, he put a mustard plaster on our chest, dice up the onions, and make us sleep like that right there. And if we had a fever, he'd slice the onion really thin, warm it up in an iron skillet, put it against the soles of our feet, pull on wool socks, and make us sleep like that. This sounds absolutely crazy, right? They worked. If, however, we had a sore, a cut, a gash, or a gaping wound, my father used the butterfly bandage. Now, he had learned this technique in the Second World War. You take a large adhesive bandage, you cut it in the shape of butterfly wings, you put one adhesive end on one side of the gash, the other on the opposite. You bring the gaping flesh together, and voila, makeshift stitches. My father never took us to the doctors. He refused to take us to the doctors. And what the butterfly bandage couldn't fix, duct tape did. Now, in my mother's defense, she wanted to take us to the doctors. But she would come in, she'd look at what my father was doing, and she would say, Carl, these children, they need medical attention. He'd stand up, put his arms and legs out and go, Josephine, there I was on the island of Luzon in the Second World War, stuck in the middle of the Philippines. And there it was, bombs dropping through the air, bullets whizzing by me. A good buddy of mine steps on a landmine, blows off his leg. He gets some shrapnel in his lung, and then he takes a bullet in the middle of his brain. Did we take him to the doctors? We did not. We applied the butterfly bandage. He was perfectly fine. If it's good enough for a veteran, it's good enough for a carpenter kid. And my mother would just sigh, roll her eyes, and say, oh, for God's sakes. But me, when I'm 6, I got no scar. My brothers and sisters interpreted this for me. Oh, you know what that means, don't ya? What? It means you're probably not a carpenter. What? Oh, what? Yeah. And here the siblings' circle of menace tightened. You're probably not even Catholic. What? You take that back! You take that back! I raised my noogie fingers to show him I was really talking business. But secretly I was really quite worried. Not a carpenter? What? Mommy, how many kids did you have? That I know of, darling. That was troubling. So I went for a little divine intervention. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Dear Saint Aldegundus, patron saint of gashes and wounds, I ask for a reverse blessing. Please do not inflict a wound upon me, and do not cure me of one. Instead, inflict one upon me underneath my chin, not too disfiguring, please, so that I know I am a carpenter. In Jesus' name I pray. One hot, sweaty, sultry summer night, Saint Aldegundis answered my prayer. So we're living on Riverside Drive, and my dad's gone most of the summer because he's a traveling salesman with the emphasis on traveling. So before he leaves, he says to my mother, "Try to hold down the fort, would you, Josephine?" And she says, "Roger that, big buddy. Wilco and out." My sister Mary and I are playing my favorite game. We play this game every single night, cops and robbers. Mary's always the cop and I'm always the robber. I'm always caught. I'm always guilty. I'm always tortured. I'm the youngest of 5. I know my role. So Mary sneaks up behind me, wraps her arms around me, throws me down into the dining room chair. Then she comes in front and pokes her finger right in my face and says, "You have been found guilty by a jury of your peers and sentenced to death." "No, not death." "Yes, death. Now, wait here while I go and get the rope." Okay. She goes into the kitchen and comes back very quickly with my mother's best dish towels. She quickly finds my wrists and ankles together and stuffs a dirty sock into my mouth. Then she points to the green couch in the living room and says, "Now, go to the electric chair." I stand up and start doing the electrocution hop. And I swear to you, friends, I am not 3 feet away from that couch when suddenly a beam of light breaks through the roof and illuminates the couch. I hear a heavenly harp. An angelic hand reaches down, grabs a hold of my ankle, and tugs. I lurch forward. My chin hits the edge of the couch and splits open. Blood spurts. Mary screams, "Mom! Reggie needs you! I didn't do it!" And she runs away and leaves me there. She leaves me there. It's a cold day, friends, when a child learns what a hard, cruel world it is. My mother comes in, she sighs, rolls her eyes, and says, "Oh, for God's sake." She unbinds my wrists and ankles and takes the sock out of my mouth. "Are you gonna apply the butterfly bandage, Mommy? Are you?" And she gets this little twinkle in her eye. "Oh, baby, no. Only Daddy can apply the butterfly bandage properly. Mommy's going to have to take you to the doctors." Only it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like this. "Take you to the doctors." She goes into the kitchen and calls the doctor, while that reverberates throughout the entire household. My brothers and sisters scramble down the stairs, circle around me and say, "You spoiled brat! You're going to the doctors." "I know I am, but what are you?" Score. My mom comes in and she's got this dry blue washcloth. She throws it at me and then she says, "Let's go." She goes out the front door and waits for me on the porch. My brothers and sisters run over to the door. They line up in birth order gauntlet. Dave, Tim, Cindy, Mary. And as I sashay by them, they say, "We hate." And I say, "I'm going to the doctor." I join my mother on the porch. It's one of those hot, humid nights, The air is fuzzy and it vacuum packs around our bodies. So the sun is setting on the St. Lawrence River, so both sky and water are tangerine orange colored. Now it's Friday night on the Catholic side of town, so the scent of fish fry is just hanging in the air. And it mingles with all those other scents of stinky seaweed and fetid fish, and that cheese northern New Yorkers love to eat on saltines with French's mustard. Limburger's got an aroma best described as carcass. So my mother goes down the stairs and she hangs her right on Riverside Drive. I'm just a couple of steps behind her. She's wearing a plaid pleated skirt and a turtleneck with no sleeves. Now, it's the turtleneck that's going to tell you everything you need to know about my mother. The turtleneck would indicate cold, but the sleeves reveal hot. Her guitar-shaped body is moving as it sways to the rhythm of the waves crashing against Mercer's dock. And she starts to walk now, listening to a Latin song only she can hear. Ba 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 da 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 ba da da ba ba. The eyes in the back of her head are watching me, and that invisible line that connects a mother and her child is taut. Well, we walk all the way up Riverside Drive. We get to the 1812 Cannons, hang right on John Street, and another right on Huguenin, and Dr. Hetty, the new doctor at that time, was waiting for us. Now back then he was tall and very skinny, hard to believe if you met Mr. Hetty later in life, but he was very, very skinny. He had these black pencil pants and a nylon white shirt. His black hair was slicked back, and his 5 o'clock shadow was kind of working on 8, and he was chain smoking. We got close enough and he pulled away the washcloth. He looked at the gash and went, "Josephine, she's going to need some stitches. I think I should give her a shot of Novocaine. Now, it might mess up her mouth and she can't talk for a while. Could you give her 2, doctor?" "Do no harm, Josephine. Do no harm." Well, he took me into the office and he plopped me on top of that wooden block he always had in his red chair, and then he turned down a light so bright it made my retinas bubble. And I watched his scarecrow skinny fingers take a silver needle and black thread down, through, and up, down, through, and up. 7 times.
Wow.
Snip. And when he was done, he gave me a safety lollipop that I planned on eating very slowly in front of my brothers and sisters. Well, when we got out, it was dark, and my mom said, "Let's take the long way home." So we retraced our steps on Huguenin, hung another right down towards the Catholic playground where no one's allowed to have any fun. And then we got to the shrine for the Blessed Virgin Mary. Now, I don't need to tell you guys that this is one of the most beautiful places in the world. I mean, I think that shrine made in the shape of a candle flame on the inside is just stunning, right? And those wide flanking steps, when I was a little kid, we all stood on them and had our pictures taken after our first communion. And that fountain that falls from the feet of the Blessed Virgin Mary and collects in a pool at the back. After Mass, we'd all go and pitch in our pennies and our dimes and our nickels and make wishes. I love that the Virgin's hands are outstretched in a symbol of universal compassion. And above her is the very first mystery novel I ever read. I Am the Immaculate Conception. Nobody's ever solved that mystery. My mom and I sit down on the benches. I I start to kick my legs, and my mom's looking off into a distance that I am never going to see. And then she turns back to me and says, "Would you like to light a votive candle?" Uh-huh. She hands me 50 cents, and I add my little light to everybody else's. And then I sit back down and keep kicking my legs, and my mother and I, we just sit there for the longest time, just listening to the sounds of St. Lawrence River, and the night birds, and the crickets, and all those songs singing inside of our head. After the longest time, she says, "Well, sport." And then she stands up and she smooths her skirt. She runs her fingers through my curly hair. "What do you say we head on home where we belong?" And then she reaches her hand out, and I grab it. My mother and I walk up Riverside Drive in Clayton, New York, where carpenters have been walking for hundreds of years when they got into a boat with people like themselves and went looking for a place that they could call